In Britain, the Second World War was a turning point, raising women's awareness of what they were capable of. With so many men called up, women had a chance to work on an equal basis.
The Ministry of Labour has launched a big scheme for training 500,000 women for arms production. Miss Caroline Hazlitt, advisor to the ministry, appeals to the women of Britain.
500,000 extra women will be needed in industry by the summer of next year. And I am quite certain that women will want to respond to this great call to help to bring victory nearer.
Up to then, large companies had been proud of the way they'd kept women out.
My firm's always made a point of not employing women. They said a man should be paid enough to keep a wife and family in comfort. All that's changed now. Temporarily, there's a worthwhile job for women folk at the same basic rate of pay as men. 1,000 women are carrying on the good work until the men come back.
At Ford's in Dagenham, one of the women who answered the call was Lillian Gillan.
I started on a piston line. Nobody else but men had done it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a good time for women. And then I looked up into the air and see this crane going by, and I decided I'd like to be a crane driver. I worked cranes from 5 ton to 30 ton, all over the different areas. Driving a crane was great because I always liked to try and do something nobody else done. And I liked it because it was definitely a man's job.
When the United States joined the war, the same appeal was made.
We must win this war, but we can't win this war unless you women take over the jobs that men are leaving. English women have done it for 3 years. American women are now doing it all over the country.
How do you like it?
I love
it. But the temporary nature of it all was constantly emphasized.
And Lee Dunning, who now welds on landing barges. And what about after this war, Lee?
Well, this job belongs to some soldier. And when he comes back, he can have it.
Oh, that's swell.
After 1945, the soldiers were released from the army in their millions and came home to assurances that their old jobs were still open to them.
Warriors, welcome. What's waiting for you? You'd be surprised. Now these women are going back to make a home for their demobilized men. After 5 years of working to this tune, there's no escaping it.
Joyce Whedon knew the limits.
Women were expected to be housewives, cleaners, cooks, mothers. That basically was women's role in life.
But crane driver Lillian Gillan tried to find another employer who'd let her do the job she'd learned.
I said, I've brought my permit with me. Is there any chance of me getting a crane driving job? And he laughed at me and he said, women don't do crane driving here. He said, you'll never get a crane driver's job. It's not a lady's job. I would have liked to have kept that job all my life, really, until I decided to retire.
In the 1940s and 50s, in the country which took so much pride in its progressiveness, there was a return to the idea that women were there to support men.
Throughout the length and breadth of America, in every city and town, every day in the week is somebody's wedding day.
I pronounce that they are husband and wife.
No ceremony more deeply symbolizes every woman's hopes.
Women were expected to find satisfaction at home, bringing up a family.
As I was growing up, I dreamed about Prince Charming. I did meet him. And I wanted to have a home and a family and a normal, average, ordinary life with children. And I really didn't have tremendous expectations.
Films and advertisements on both sides of the Atlantic helped reinforce the stereotype, equating happiness with fulfillment at home.
Difference if you're rich or poor, or if you're smart or dumb. A woman's place in this old world is under some man's thumb.
Glad you dropped in. Amazing, isn't it? Look at that. And she did the washing and ironing today for a family of 5. The 4 of us and the baby upstairs.
These are the sort of things that make my mouth water. I'm all for this kind of education. It's like taking out third-party insurance on mankind's future digestion. June's finished her polishing, Mavis has made the beds, Anne's done the sweeping. But what's a home without a man about the house? And that's where the headmaster, Edwin Crawford, comes in. And trust a man to know the right time to arrive. This is 1 cup of coffee that'll be right up to standard, but not unless he comes back for a second will she get top marks.
On the first morning of our honeymoon, I discovered my beautiful bride didn't know the first thing about coffee. And I love good coffee. Wife, I said, this is Maxwell House. So remember, be a good little Maxwell housewife, and this honeymoon could last forever.
Woman's lot is to give and give, and go on giving.
Carol took a general home economics course. Not one which would lead to professional employment, but one which fitted her for that very important career of being Mrs. Bill Johnson.
And of course, women were less technically competent than men.
Open the door.
Sorry, honey. My watch stopped.
That's because you forgot to wind it again, Alice.
Even when women's energy was acknowledged, the tone was patronizing.
What is that whipcord resilience that lets the weaker sex play half the night, then bob up clear-eyed, ready for the next morning's work?
In fact, 1/3 of all American women worked outside the home. But in the 1950s, most were still restricted to low-paying menial jobs with no chance of becoming supervisors or managers. At the Southern Bell Phone Company, the management had a clear policy on what was appropriate for women. They could be operators, but go no higher. Lorena Weeks worked on a switchboard in Atlanta, Georgia.
Telephone operators work around the clock, and I work split hours so that I could be with my children in the afternoon. I'd go to work at 11, get off at 2 in the afternoon, pick them up from school, feed them, and go back to work at 7 o'clock at night. That was hard. I worked 17 years before I had a half day for Christmas with my children. I'd watch these men, the switchmen, and work that I felt that I could do. And this meant so much more pay and better hours. And it was just type work that I would like to do too.
Whatever education women had, or whatever their interests, the limits were the same. Dusty Rhodes graduated from college in 1950, but knew her childhood dream of being a pilot would never be realized.
We had the national air races in Cleveland every year, and so aviation was very big in my life. And I had, up till I was in high school, and found out from my father, you can't be an airline pilot, darling, they don't hire ladies. It broke my heart, but so I settled on being maybe a flight attendant, maybe a stewardess.
Every day I'm learning more. It'll make me a good stewardess, a better human being, and after a while, maybe, a better wife. At least I can dream, can't I?
The image of a stewardess is of a young, single girl. And the airlines wanted to perpetuate that almost as an image that the male could get on there and think, maybe I may have a date tonight.
Eastern Airlines presents The Losers.
She's awkward. Not very friendly. But she's too young. Oh, she bites nails. She wears glasses. Honey, no, the other, she's married. Well.
Like everyone else, Dusty Rhodes was expected to stop the job when she turned 32.
That made me angry. It really did. It just it violated my sense of fair play that pilots can be fired at age 60 and we were fired at age 32. There's something was wrong there.
Even when women did break through to the jobs they wanted, they found new barriers. Mary Stott managed to become a journalist but couldn't get promotion.
I would train young man after young man, and then they would step over my head and give me instructions, and I just couldn't endure it. So I went to the editor rather nervously and said, "Why, Mr. Henry, don't I measure up?" "Oh," he said, "there's nothing wrong with your work, but we have to safeguard the succession, and the successor has to be a man."